Om Shri Sai Ram, Sri Satya Sai Baba and Naranarayana Gugai Ashram. Chapter 4. How the young man came under Baba's care. Sai Baba World Conference in Mumbai, May 1968. The leader of the Gufa Ashram is from Janakpur, located in the Nepalese region of Mithila. He was born into a glorious lineage of Brahmins with a rich spiritual past. After the boy finished high school, his father decided to move to Bangalore to allow his son to complete higher education there. The boy chose the exact sciences and graduated in mathematics. There, Sai Baba also adopted him as his own son. And that went as follows. After taking his last math exam, the young man stayed with his parents in Bangalore for a while to blow out. One day, the lady of the house heard that there was a sannyasi at the door asking for alms. Annapurne, Sadhapurne, Sankare, Pranavallabhe, Jnana Vairagya Siddhyartam, Bhiksham Dehimam Parvati. O Mother Annapurna, dear friend of Shankara, your storage sheds are always full. O Mother Parvati, please give me alms so that I may be successful in acquiring knowledge and total renunciation. The lady in question, the mother of the young man mentioned, heard his prayer and opened the door. She saw a sannyasi that looked very serene. The impression she had on him filled her with joy, for she was convinced that he was no ordinary begging monk. It is common for beggars and mendicants to go from house to house, and the lady of the house usually gives them what she can afford. But when a mendicant comes along who radiates spiritual realization, it is customary that the visitor is asked what he wants and that his wishes are met as much as possible. Driven by this pious impulse, the woman invited him to enter. Great Lord, what a great honor it is for us that you want to come to us. Tell me how we can serve you. The sannyasi reacted as if he had been waiting for this opportunity and rejoiced to ask if she was really willing to give him the alms he would ask for. After answering 3 times in the affirmative, the sannyasi said, "If you really mean that, grant me the favor I want from you." The woman asked him to sit down and said, "Please tell me what you want." In the meantime, her husband and youngest son had also entered. They greeted the sannyasi and sat down as well. The sannyasi asked, "How many sons do you have?" "5," replied the mother. "And what are they doing?" "The eldest 4 have graduated. They are already married and have built up a good life. They are happy and live well. And this one here is our youngest son. He is still studying and will soon obtain his doctorate in mathematics and physics. With your blessings, we hope to find a marriage partner for him within 6 months, after which we ourselves are released from our responsibilities to the children. We would like to spend the years that remain in meditation and prayer." The sannyasi paused, then replied, "That means to him getting married, raising children, then arranging another marriage for them, and having grandchildren. But if you keep this worldly tradition, you will fall right into a dangerous trap. Do you see following these rules of conduct as the goal of life?" The couple was taken aback by this question. They had never met anyone who had spoken so boldly to them and thus revealed to them the naked facts of life. After she had recovered somewhat from the shock, the mother said, "But Venerable Lord, it is everywhere like that. Everyone does that. It simply belongs to earthly life in Kali era. Those are the precepts we have to adhere to today. Would you please explain what you think we should do then? The sannyasi replied, you came into the world as a human, and the best people were born as Brahmins. They owe this to their good deeds in previous lives. You are not lacking, and you also know what scriptures say. Then why do you turn away from serving your fellow men? We have an old tradition that if one has 5 sons, one of them should make himself available to serve others. If any member of the family achieves self-realization, the burden of sin for all the family will be reduced. Many other people will see the value of service, and so such generous feelings will spread again. In this way, the sannyasi continued his exalted philosophies for some time. The couple listened attentively. Even the master of the house, who has amassed an extensive knowledge of the scriptures, was silent and astonished that his knowledge was next to nothing compared to that of the sannyasin. He thought he had better keep his mouth shut with someone with so much of authority. Meanwhile, the sannyasi reminded the mother of her promise and said, you have given your word, and I now ask you for your youngest son. I will make him a benefactor of mankind and a man of great wisdom. The two spouses immediately poured water into the palm of their hands and confirmed their vows in Sanskrit. They were pleased with the special happiness they have received and recited from the book Bhagavatam. All the possessions and relatives of him whose mind and soul are absorbed in God, or of him who has achieved complete detachment, will be sanctified into the 21st generation and eventually become one with God. Driven by the pious feelings, they entrusted their youngest son to sannyasin. Then the sannyasi again emphasized their promise. So from now on, this boy no longer belongs to you, he is mine. But I leave my student in your God and will not come to claim him until the time is right. The couple agreed. Then the sannyasi got up and immediately left the house. The sannyasi was nowhere to be seen when the couple had recovered from the rapture. Overcome with reverence and joyful feelings, the mother almost burst into tears and sighed, how hard of you, O Lord, that you would not accept even the simple food that I have put before you. Although no one was around, she heard a voice say, it is enough. It is already received. I have already received my alms. When the mother heard these words, her initial wonder turned into a firm conviction. The Lord himself visited my home today. There is no doubt about that. From then on, the couple spent most of the day remembering those unforgettable moments. Few days later, the youngest son asked for permission to accept an invitation. I received a letter from friends from Madras inviting me to stay with them for a while, and since it still takes a month before I get the results of my exams, the parents liked this to their youngest son too. The next day, their son arrived in Madras. After inquiring about each other's well-being, his friends told him that they intended to spend their vacation in a useful way and that they had specifically invited him to that edifying program. Then they said, Puttaparthi, that is where the Lord Sai lives, and you cannot imagine a holier and more joyful scene than beholding his divine form. We have therefore asked you to come here to make a pilgrimage to that holy place together. All agreed to this proposal, and so a group of about 10 students reached Prasantinalayam. The next day, they were lucky enough to receive Sai Darshan and touch his lotus feet. The Lord gave the group such a loving look that it seemed that he doused them with nectar. He also materialized Vibhuti and gave it to one of the group members. Each of them put some on his forehead and cleared his speech by taking a little bit of it too. They really enjoyed the bhajans which were sung in the temple. Around 10 o'clock, they returned to their room and told each other what they had experienced. The Bangalore student was the first. It was fascinating to watch Baba. I experienced pure joy and happiness, and I am incredibly grateful that you let me participate in this special holiday program. He paused for a few minutes, then continued. Still, my heart must be friends, and I hope you won't blame me. It makes sense that we consider Sai Baba as a high soul with great spiritual powers, and that it is good for us to receive the darshan. That is why we fold our hands out of respect and esteem when we see him. Listen to his teachings and try to imitate him in order to make our lives more meaningful. But somehow I hate to see people touching his feet, people stretching out on the ground in front of him, smearing their forehead with the sand as he walks on, turning to him like he is God. Sing his glory, while they keep telling themselves that they themselves are so bad and poor. Can a man ever become God when the soul is equated with the oversoul? In support of his assertion, the young man added, in fact, every individual is a warehouse full of good and bad thoughts. He is born with all kinds of tendencies and thought patterns. Some do not believe in a God. According to them, there is no soul or creator. They follow a path that is rejected by our spiritual leaders. Others say that they are devoted to God and believe in the existence of soul and its creator. To reinforce their point of view, they regularly receive monks in orange at home who have proclaimed themselves God Almighty. Then he paused, and with a laugh, because he didn't believe it himself, he told the others that such a mendicant had also visited his childhood home the week before, giving such an impressive story that his parents had completely captivated him and had given himself as alms to the monk. After all, I am not a thing such as table or a chair, nor an animal such as cow or goat, not something you can just give away to the first one, right? As for the mystery behind which the phenomenon God is hidden, that is something that we humans cannot and should not try to comprehend. To this day, no one can provide reliable evidence of God's existence. The boys from Madras heard the young man's story patiently and a little surprised, then said, "Dear friend, we are glad that you felt so peaceful after Baba's darshan. You also accepted him as a Mahatma." While in earlier discussions on this subject, you used to label people like that as hypocrites and speak of soul and creator as something you could never get out of. You called it a maze. We hope that after Baba's darshan, you have now revised your opinion of really great people. Sooner or later, you will also notice that there really can be a perfect being or Purna Purusha that we mention as Paramatma. It is quite possible that in the coming days, you will surpass all of us in respect and veneration for Lord Sai, that you will sing his glory and touch his holy feet. We say that because we have seen people come in here like a roaring lion and leave like a lamb, humble and converted. The student from Bangalore rushed to clarify his position on great men and said, "I hope none of you blame me, but when I called Sai Baba a great soul, I just meant that he was clearly above the common man and possesses a number of mystical spiritual powers. So it makes sense that we get pious feelings when we see him, and that elevates us above ourselves. But that greatness is also achievable for us. If we live a godly life and focus on our spiritual disciplines, we can achieve that level too." However, the boys from Madras were not satisfied with that. They insisted that Sai Baba was much more, that in him all knowledge and all virtues are bundled. In other words, he was God himself. For example, discussions about Bhagavan continued throughout the day, the next day something happened. Baba called in the student from Bangalore for an interview. Immediately after entering the interview room, Baba turned to the young man and said admonishingly, "You come from a devout family and yet you speak and think like an atheist, like someone who doubts everything. Your parents are deeply religious people and lead simple lives. Why do you hurt them like that?" When he heard these words from Baba, he was stunned. He was now convinced that Baba knew everything about what he had discussed with his friends. Through those few sentences, Lord Sai shown that he knew what was going on in the young man's mind. Baba continued, "Okay, for now you will go abroad. When you come back, I will take care of everything else." And that ended the interview. The young man left the room in a state of utter confusion and reflected on what the Lord had said to him. First, he had presented his denial to him, and he was absolutely right about that. But then he said he would go abroad. That is impossible, isn't it? He thought. There is nothing to point in that direction, thus he is absolutely wrong. After spending several days in sublime atmosphere of Prasantinalayam, the group of students left for home. The student from Bangalore stayed in Madras for a few more days and returned to Bangalore when the results of exams approached. When he went to university to hear the results, he was called to the rector Magnificus, who congratulated him on the results. He had the highest possible figures. Then he asked the young man if he would do his university a favor before receiving his diploma. The young man spoke in all humility, "If I can be of service to my alma mater, I'll be happy to do so." The rector Magnificus then said, "The University of California in the United States has organized a debate on the ancient Vedas. All students who have not yet obtained their doctorate can participate in this discussion. During this time, you attended lectures here. We have heard you speak several times, and we believe, given the spiritual background of your family and your great knowledge of Vedas, that you are the right person to join our university, represent the state will pay all your costs." With a bit of strange feeling about the unexpectedness of going abroad, the young man returned home. And immediately he remembered what Bhagavan had said to him, "You are going abroad now and we will speak again when you return." These words kept ringing in him. Lord Sai seems to be the omniscient, for how could he otherwise predict the events of my life before anyone had any idea of it? Would my friends be right after all? Could Baba be God after all? Somewhere in the back of his mind, the doubt kept gnawing. So he said to himself, "If Baba really is God, it shouldn't take him the slightest effort to let me win. After all, as the omnipresent God, he is also present in myself. If he gives me the right arguments during the debate and allows me to be the winner, I will accept him to be God. This is a good opportunity to test him. I would accept him as a God. This is a good opportunity to test him as well." The young man arrived in California at the appointed time. The debate would last 3 days. On the one hand was a group of contenders who held the view that the Vedas had an origin and that these 4 Vedas were recorded by Sri Vyasa at the end of the Dwapara era. After all, they are called Adi Granth, something that has the beginning. But everything that has a beginning also has an end, and therefore they cannot possibly be Anaditat. That is to say, without a beginning and end. So, they are not eternal. The opposing party claimed that the Vedas came from one source, that they are eternal, and that they have provided uninterrupted flow of cultural and spiritual vistas since the time immemorial. The group believed that Maharishi Vyasa did not write the Vedas himself, but that he only collected and wrote down God's words. They existed long before Vyasa, but were scattered here and there. At that time, there was there were already several sages, ascetics, and teachers who recited Vedic chants by heart, but these were not properly arranged and put forward in context. Maharishi Vyasa correctly classified the Vedas. It had to be because at the end of the Dwapara era, human wisdom was lost because evil arose everywhere. With the entering of the Kali era, materialism prevailed, passions ran high, and humanity became filled with greed. The cardinal virtues of truth, righteousness, peace, love, and non-violence were nowhere to be found. Meditation, study of sacred writings, and other spiritual exercises became increasingly obsolete. Maharishi Vyasa foresaw what was going to happen and did two things of great significance. He divided the contents of the entire Veda into 4 parts and called them the 4 Vedas. Then he taught his 4 principal students each in a Veda and entrusted them with the responsibility to maintain it. These 4 students were Vaishampayana, Pila, Sumantanand, and Jaimini. These 4 parts were impressive, especially when you see how they are arranged by subject. In the book known as Rigveda, the hymns pertaining to the Creator and the lesser gods and goddesses are collected. The other hymns are described in the Samaveda, songs accompanying sacrifices. In the Yajurveda, mantras in the moon culture, verse rituals were described, which included sacrifices. Contains the part called Adharva Veda related to Vedic mythology and indications of human behavior in different situations. An expert in one or more of the 4 Vedas was called Vedi, Dvivedi, Trivedi, and Chaturvedi respectively. And it was Lord Narayana, Vishnu himself, who came to the earth in the form of Vyasa to do this service to mankind. For example, the debate continued for 3 consecutive days with arguments and counter-arguments alternating. Only through his intelligence, his knowledge, and his logical train of thought did the young man from Bangalore gain the upper hand. The party he represented won the debate and he received several additional awards for his personal appearance. On the 4th day, the whole group gathered and the tape of the debate was played. The arguments put forward by a Bangalore student was astonishing. His logic and his quotes to reinforce these arguments are impressive. How is it possible? Thought the young man to himself, I would never have been able to argue my statements like that. In those kinds of situations, you usually forget everything that is stored in your memory and you get nervous. But with me, there is no sign of that. Baba must have guided me from a distance. Someone who not only inspires me, but also turning me into his mouthpiece cannot but be the Almighty Creator himself. It is not in the Puranas that God is attributed the following attributes: He who knows everything about life and death of all creatures, who can see the good and bad deeds in a next existence and also knows the ignorance that plunges us into the abyss. He who records the life pattern of each individual, he is known as the Supreme Lord. Well, if God is not omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient, he cannot make his creation function properly. Because he is ubiquitous, he knows the imprinted patterns of behavior that everyone brings from past lives. By his omnipotence, he determines the end result of all acts performed in life and then rewards with heaven or punishes with hell. Now the young man also brought back memories of this sacred moment of Baba's darshan. When I was in the interview room with Baba, I experienced his omniscience, and there is no reason why I should not surrender to him. The very first look I took on Baba gave my longing heart an indescribable peace. I felt completely and satisfied. I have ridiculed my friends for touching his feet, but now I would like to do the same because I am sure that all my burden of sin will be washed away from the past lives. On his return, he went straight to Puttaparthi, hoping to speak to Baba. While internally chanting Baba's glory, he laid himself at his feet like a flower. The Lord blessed him and told him about his future. I made sure you were born in a good and pious environment, so do not take an interest in worldly matters. You will have to walk a spiritual path. Now go home to see your parents and then come back. The student went home with Baba's blessing. His parents were pleasantly surprised to find that their son had started to think religiously. The whole family now moved back to Janakpur, located in their native Nepal. The young man continued to live with his parents and led a disciplined life. After a year, he returned to Puttaparthi for the Lord's promised maintenance. During this interview, the Lord taught him in detail the principles of breath control and finally said, "Don't go back home because your real house is where you meditate. Go to the Chaparan forest and do your meditations there. I am your mother, father, and teacher. Try to recognize me because I am the sannyasi that you received from your parents as alms. You won that debate in California because of me. Since the day I accepted you as alms, I have been with you every moment and will continue to be so." Hearing this, the young man's joy knew no bounds, for now he could see in the Lord his real father, mother, and teacher. Finally, Bhagavan Baba said that he would achieve self-realization in the Champaran forest. For a moment, the fear of unknown arose. He thought of various hurdles to expect in the forest. How should I practice asceticism? How do I get food? All these kinds of questions went through his mind. But the next moment, he regained his confidence and said to himself, "How stupid of me to think of such trivialities. If my Lord Sai can make me win an international debate so far away in California, shouldn't he be able to take care of my daily maintenance in the forest? And he will certainly do that." When he reached the Champaran forest, he was lucky enough to have an old one Mahatma to meet Swami Vamadeva. This Swamiji taught him everything needed. The young man concentrated on his spiritual discipline and spent 6 years there, imposing strict asceticism on himself. He practiced the control of the breathing as instructed by Baba, and over time he could hold his breath for over an hour. He gradually gained control of his senses and developed a form of equanimity that is so characteristic of true ascetic. This shows that when Lord Sai takes someone under his care, he helps them to become truly human and in such a way that they, as he progresses on the path of spiritual discipline, he can achieve the purpose of life to be absorbed in God. After completing his asceticism in the Champaran forest, the young man went to Vrindavan, Bhagavan Baba's residence in Whitefield, with 10 other devotees in 1983. What followed after that has been described earlier in this booklet. This completes this chapter. Om Shri Sai Ram. Sai Ram, Sai Ram, Sai Ram, Sai Ram. Sai Ram, Sai Ram, Sai Ram, Sai Ram. Sai Ram, Sai Ram.